Hello children, this is Austin, your biology teacher. I hope you are all safe at your home. So today we are going to start our biology classes. So before starting our class, I just want to discuss something with you. So you would have taken biology out of your interest, some would have taken without your interest, some would have taken because of your parents' compulsion. So no matter what, I want just two things from you. You have to listen to my class from the first minute till the last minute. Okay, so there should not be any distractions. Don't get distracted, because if you listen, you will easily learn. Okay, your timing for learning will be very less when you listen to the class, right? So I want you to listen to the class first, and then you have to take down the notes in your science note. Either you have to put a separate note for biology, so follow this. So take down the notes from the class that I have taken, and then doubts, wherever you get the doubt, should be noted down and it should be cleared as soon as the class is over. Okay, or else we will have the Zoom meet, so that time, or the Google meet. Okay, so that time you can clarify your doubts, right? So these two things, if you are doing it for me, I am very sure you will get good marks in your exam. So today we can get into the class first. So we are going to start up with your zoology. Okay, so zoology, the first chapter that you are having in zoology is the living world. So living world means what? We are going to learn about the living organism that is present in the world. So that is what known as the living world, right? So in the content, so what are the things that you are going to learn in this particular class that we will see now? So the first one, you are going to learn about diversity in the living organism. So you know what is diversity? Diversity means what? Differences, right? So you are going to learn about what are the differences that is there in each organisms, right? So that is the diversity in living organism. And the second one is need for classification. So why what is the need for classification? Why we want to classify the organisms? So we have n number of species, n number of plants and animals. So why we need to classify them? So that is the second topic. And then the third one, taxonomy and systematics. So we are going to learn what is taxonomy and what is systematics, and then we are going to learn about the history of classification. So how was the classification earlier? That is in history, how it was classified in earlier stages. So that we will be learning, and then we will be learning about the three domains of life. So this is what a classification. So this is also a classification where the Carl was, he gave this three domains of life. Okay, so we will be learning about all these content in this particular video. So now we can get into the first topic, that is diversity in the living organisms. So we know we have n number of species, so each organism is having its own environment, so it lives in its own environment. So some are living in water, some are living in land, so we have different species. So this is what we will tell it as a diversity. So in a biology we will give a term called as biodiversity, that is the presence of large number of species in a particular ecosystem. So suppose take an example, ecosystem means it is a particular environment. So suppose take an example of a forest ecosystem or a pond ecosystem, right? So in forest or pond ecosystem, take an example of a pond ecosystem. In pond ecosystem there are many fishes that is living in that particular water. There are some other organisms that are living in that particular water, and there are some biotic and abiotic factors too. So you know what is biotic and what is abiotic, right? So biotic means living, abiotic means non-living. So this is what known as the ecosystem. This was given by Tansley. Okay, so this is what the community of biotic and abiotic factors, it is known as the ecosystems. For example, what is this abiotic factors? So we know that biotic means living, so all the living organism in that particular environment will come under the biotic. So what is this abiotic factors? So the light, temperature, so everything is coming under the abiotic factor. So this organism is living in relationship with this abiotic factor. So biotic is living in relationship with this abiotic, and it is prevailing in a common environment. So this is what we will tell it as a ecosystem, right? So next, biodiversity. The term biodiversity was given by, okay, it was introduced by Walter Rosen, okay, in 1985. So this is what known as the diversity in living organism. You are having just an intro, right? Next we will learn about the characteristic features of the living organisms. So what are the features that a living organism has? So what are the characteristics on which basis we are telling that this organism a living organism? So what are the characteristics that is needed for the particular organism? So the first one, cellular organization. First we will classify the animals based on the cellular organization, whether it is a single cell or multi-cell. Single cell organism means we will tell it as a unicellular organisms, or multicellular. If it has more than one cell, that we will tell it as a multicellular organisms. So we will have the cellular organization in case of living organism, and then we will have about the nutrition. So how it takes the nutrition, whether it can prepare its own food, or whether it is dependent on some other. So own food means there will be a photosynthetic one, so they can prepare their own food. Whereas they are heterotrophic means they will depend on some other organism, some other plants, they will eat some other plants, or they will eat some other animals. So that is what known as a heterotrophic. So what mode of nutrition the particular organism is having, that is also a characteristic. And then the respiration, how it respires, either it respires with the lungs or gills, so it depends upon the different organism, right? And then about the metabolism and growth, you know what is metabolism, right? So there are two process that is happening here. One is catabolism and another one is anabolism. Catabolism means breaking down. So your food you are eating, it is being broken down into energy, right? So that is a catabolism. Anabolism means it is building up. Okay, so this is what the metabolism process. And then response to stimuli, so how an organism is responding to a particular stimuli, so that is what the response to stimuli. And then the reproduction process, whether it is following an asexual method of reproduction or whether the organism is following a sexual method of reproduction, this is what comes under this reproduction. And then about the movement, whether how it is moving from one place to another. Okay, there are some animals which can fly, there are some animals which can crawl, or there are some animals which can swim. So how it is moving from one place to another, this is what known as the movement. And then excretion process, how the excretion process is happening. So all these characteristics defines a living organism. So these are all the characteristic features of a living organism. So these features were understood or were studied by the taxonomist or the biologist, and they classified the animals. Okay, so this is what the characteristic features. And next we are going on to the need for classification. So what is the need? So we are having some 5 important points why we need to classify the organisms, that we are going to learn now. So listen now. So the first point, to identify and differentiate closely related species. So some species are very close to each other. Okay, they will be having some similarities between them, but we have to identify them based on some dissimilarities. So we have to identify and differentiate the closely related species. So we have to differentiate them. Before that, I will give an example for you. Suppose take example yourself. You are in a grade 11, right? So you're in standard 11. You are in group 11A. So you have been categorized based on some characteristics that you have, right? So you have taken max biology group. So we have put you in the 11A, right? So some would have taken computer science or some other pure science, they would be in pure science group. So based on the group, we are separating you or we are classifying you, and we have put into a particular class, right? So this is what the classification. So first one, to identify and differentiate the closely related species. You and your friend are close, but we are categorizing you by the subject that you have taken, right? So this is what the first point. And second one is to know the variation among the species. So what are the differences you have? That is what the variation. So different organism will have different variations, right? So that we will be learning, that classification only will give a clear understanding of variation between the organisms. And then to understand the evolution of species, how an organism has evolved, okay, how a species has evolved, how it was in earlier stage, how it is now. So this evolution is also understandable only with the help of classification. And then the fourth one, to create a phylogenetic tree among the different groups. So different organism will be there, they will have a common history. So based on that history, phylogenetic means it is just a evolutionary history of organism. So based on the history of the organism, we are putting a tree format, and we are learning how this organism has been evolved. So this is what the phylogenetic tree. And then to conveniently study about the living organisms. So to learn conveniently about all the living organisms, we want this classification process. So we need these 5 basic points. Okay, so these 5 basic points are needed. It's very much essential for classification. It defines that why we need the classification process. So what are they? First one is to identify and differentiate the closely related species. Second one, to know the variation among the species. Third one, to understand the evolution of species. Fourth one, to create a phylogenetic tree. And then fifth one, to conveniently study the living organisms. So this is the basic need for classification, right? Understood? Yes. Next we are moving on with the taxonomy and systematics. So first we will learn what is this taxonomy process. So taxonomy, it is a science of arrangement of living organisms. So you are just arranging the living organism. So this is a science of arrangement of living organism with some factors in mind. So what are that factors is? First one is classification, then description of that particular organism, and then you are going to identify what the organism is, and we are going to give the naming for the particular organism. So these four factors will be followed in this taxonomy. Okay, so what is taxonomy? It is a science of arranging the organism along with all these four factors, that is classification first, and then description of that particular animal, and then identification of the particular animal, and then we are giving a name for that particular animal. So this is what known as the taxonomy. So the taxonomy, the word taxonomy was coined by Augustin Pyramus de Candolle in 1813. But the father of taxonomy is Aristotle. So coined by Augustine, but the father of taxonomy is Aristotle. Okay, and another one fellow, that is Carolus Linnaeus. So he was the father of modern taxonomy. So Aristotle was the father of taxonomy, and later that taxonomy had evolved and it get into a stage called as modern taxonomy. So who is the father of modern taxonomy? Means it is the Carolus Linnaeus who introduced it, right? So this is what about the taxonomy and systematics. So now we will learn what is systematics in depth. Okay, systematics, system means what? What is system? Giving a sequence, okay, or systemizing something. That is what known as the systematics. So this main criteria of this systematics is, first you have to identify, describe, name, arrange, and also preserving the particular organism. So this is what known as the systematics. Okay, so here we will see what is the relationship here. So evolutionary history of a species and environmental adaptation. So how a species has been evolved, the history, evolutionary history of a particular species is considered, and how the environmental adaptations was there, how the organism was adapted to its environment, everything is considered here. And the second point here is interrelationship between the species, how one species has lived, okay, how it was interacting with each other. So how the relationship between the two species was there. So everything was calculated. Okay, so this is what known as the systematics. So systematics means investigating the evolutionary history of the species, how the environmental adaptations was there, and then also learning about the interrelationship between the species. One species and the next species, how it interacted with each other. So everything we will be learning in the systematics, right? And now the history of classification, how the classification was done earlier stages, how it was done, how the organisms were classified, everything we will be learning here, right? So history of classification, early classification, how was the early classification? So early classification was very simple. It was into two types. One is harmful animals, another one is beneficial animals. So the animals which were harmful for human beings, they were considered to be the harmful animals, and some were considered to be as beneficial because they gave something for the mankind. So this was the two classification, and they also classified the animals into 5 groups. One is domestic animals, which can be brought up by the homes, right? Domestic animals. And then the second one is wild animals. You know what is wild animals? And then the creeping animals, and then flying animals, and then the sea animals. So this was the 5 groups that were classified in the earlier classification. Okay, so next came the Aristotle's classification. So Aristotle was the first one to classify the all animals in the history of animals. So what he attempted is, he just classified into 2. All the living organisms were classified into these 2 categories, that is, one is animals and one is plants. Okay, so in that animals, he classified the animals based on the terrestrial, aerial, and aquatic. You know what is terrestrial, what is aerial. So terrestrial means land animals, aerial means that is flying. So next one is aquatic, means it is living in water, right? So this was his classification, and he also classified the animals into 2 types. One is the presence of red blood, and another one is absence of red blood. So enema and anema. So this was the 2 classification that he gave. So in the animals, he classified into 3 1, that is terrestrial, aerial, and aquatic. In these three, he gave the animals that is having the red blood cells and not having the red blood cells. That is what as the enema and anema. Okay, so presence of red blood cells and absence of red blood cells. So this was his classification, right? But this classification had many limitations. So it was not sufficient, because this classification will not give a correct understanding. For example, they have given a beautiful example. Suppose take an example of tadpoles of a frog. So you know that the frog will give that is, it will release the sperm and egg outside in the water. So the reproduction normally occurs, the fertilization normally occurs in the water. So what happens, the tadpoles will be formed in the water. So when the frogs are in the tadpole stage, they will be in the water and they will have the gills. Okay, they will have the gills which will be used for respiration process. And later, when these tadpoles are growing and when they have developed into an adult frog, the frog will develop the lungs by itself and it will respire through lungs. So you know what is a amphibian. So frog is an amphibian. It can live both in land as well as in water. So in water it can use its gills to respire, and in the land it can use its lungs. So now what happened? We cannot place this frog in the water or land animal. So this was a confusion. Okay. So Aristotle's classification had many limitations. So you cannot classify based on Aristotle's classification. So then came the modern taxonomy of Carolus Linnaeus. Before that, we have to know some other facts. So the father of botany, that is Theophrastus. So he is the father of botany. So he has done some research and he has classified the plants. You know, in botany you will be learning about the plants. In zoology you will be learning about the animals. So he was the father of botany. So he was a student. Whose student? Aristotle's student. So he was the student of Aristotle. So he is the Theophrastus. He is the father of botany. He classified the plants. Okay. And then another one fellow, John Ray. So he published a book, that is Methodus Plantarum. So it is a book in which he has explained about 18,000 plant species. Okay, so he has explained about 18,000 plant species in his book, right? And this is what the modern taxonomy. So what is this modern taxonomy? It was given by Carolus Linnaeus. So what it tells about is, it evaluates the resemblance and differences through statistical methods followed by a computer analysis. So see here, the earlier classification was very simple, but in modern taxonomy the technology is being involved. So based on computer analysis, even very minute differences between the organisms also has been calculated and they were being grouped. So this is what known as the modern taxonomy. Okay, and next there is a classification called as cladistic classification. So what is this? Genetic difference between all species is given in a phylogenetic tree. So this is what known as the cladistic classification. So if we see here, it was given by Ernest Haeckel. So it was represented, it is just a evolutionary relationship with the tree diagram. So you are just going to learn about the evolutionary history of a particular organism or its relationship with the other organism in a form of a tree. So that is what we will tell it as a cladogram. Okay, so it was based on two factors. One is ancestral characteristics, another one is derived characters. So one is ancestral characters, another one is derived characters. So this is an example of a cladogram. So you can see that all our eukaryotes, all our vertebrates are having the four limbs, and you can see the classification they have and the interrelationship they have. So see here, the reptiles and birds, they have the amniotic egg. Rodents and primates, they have the hair in them, and amphibians, they are four limbs, and fishes, they are vertebrate, and they are all eukaryotes. So all these characteristics have some interrelationship between them, and we are putting them together in a form of a tree called as cladogram. So this is a phylogenetic tree, and together we will tell this particular framework as a cladogram. Okay, so this is the cladistic classification. Next you are going to learn about the three domains. Okay, you are going to learn about the three domains of life. So it was given by Carl Voss. So what are these three domains is, first one is archaea. So it is the first category, first domain, archaea. The second domain, bacteria, and the third domain, eukarya. So here in three domain classification, it was classified by, or it was proposed by Carl Voss. So these classified organisms were based on the differences in their rRNA, 16S rRNA. Based on the differences, we have given, or we have classified into three groups. If you see here, the first two groups, Archaea and bacteria both are prokaryotic group. So we are just separating the prokaryotic into two. One is archaea, another one is bacteria. So archaea means we have some of the organism that is coming under archaea, and then bacteria it includes all the bacteria there, and then the eukarya it includes all the eukaryotes. So together all the eukaryotes are placed under one category, that is eukarya, but prokaryotes is been separated into two. One is archaea, another one is bacteria. So this was the classification. So it was given by Carl Woese. So first we will learn what is domain archaea in depth. Okay, so domain archaea means extremophiles. So what is this word extreme? So you know what is the meaning of the word extreme? So in extreme conditions this organism will survive. That is what known as extremophiles. For example, it can live in very hot climate also, or it can live in very cold climate also, wherever. Okay, even in the extreme climates it can survive. So that is what this archaea is. Okay, so first one, it is a single celled prokaryote. So archaea, it includes all the single celled prokaryotic organism will be coming under this archaea. And here in this organisms in this archaea will have the ability to grow in extreme conditions. This is what a very distinguishing feature of this particular archaea. Okay, the organism, the prokaryote that is present in this domain archaea will have the ability to grow in extreme conditions. So extreme conditions means, example, hot spring or volcanic vents. So hot springs, volcanic vents, the volcanoes will have the very hot temperature. Even in that volcanic vents this organism will survive. So that is what the character. Okay, and then it can prepare food without oxygen too. So these organisms has the ability to prepare food without oxygen. Then how it prepares the food? It prepares with the help of the chemical that is present in that particular extreme environment. So it can use the hydrogen sulfide or other chemicals from that particular hot environment, and it uses this particular chemicals and it can prepare its own food. There is no need for any oxygen there. So this is what the extremophiles. Okay, so here we are having three types of organisms. One is methanogens. It produces the methane gas. It's an important one word, children, please note it down. Methanogens, it produces methane gas. And then the halophiles, it lives in the salty environment. So even in extreme salt conditions these organisms will be found there. So that is what known as halophiles. And then thermoacidophiles. Thermo means temperature. The word thermo means temperature. So thermoacidophiles means it can live in acidic environment, acidophile. So it can live in acidic environment and also in the high temperature environment. So that is what known as thermoacidophiles. So these are the three different types of organisms that is coming under the domain archaea. I hope you have understood. And the second domain, bacteria. So here all the bacteria will be here. So bacteria are prokaryotic and they will not have any nucleus. So what is the difference between prokaryote and a eukaryote? Prokaryote means will have a well-defined nucleus. Will not have a well-defined nucleus, or it will not have any other histone proteins in it. Okay, it is just a simpler organization. Whereas eukaryote, it is having a membrane-bound organelles. It has organelles. It has the nucleus, everything, the well-defined nucleus, everything there. It will be well defined in case of eukaryote, but in prokaryote there is no well defined nucleus, there is no membrane bound organelles and all. So this is what the difference, right? So here in bacteria you are having the prokaryotic organisms and the DNA exists in the circular chromosome. For example, take an example of bacteria. In bacteria, if you see, there is a single circular chromosome, that's all. So this is what the bacteria. And then the no membrane bound organelles. So no membrane bound organelles will not be present. In a cell there are some organelles that is present, the cell organelles, right? So in case of prokaryote there will not be any cell organelles. And then here some will be decomposers. They will help in decomposing the dead and decayed matter. So that is the decomposers role. And some will be the photosynthesizers. So they can prepare their own food. For example, cyanobacteria. You can take an example of cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria can prepare their own food. It is otherwise called as blue-green algae. Okay, so it's an important one word too. Please note it down. Cyanobacteria means it is a blue-green algae. So this is coming under this domain bacteria. So they are photosynthesizers. They can prepare their own food. And some are disease-causing, that is harmful. Okay, there are some bacteria that is useful, that is we will tell it as a probiotic bacteria, and some are harmful, that we will tell it as a harmful bacteria or disease causing bacteria. We will tell that's a pathogenic also. Pathogens means what? They cause diseases. So that is what the pathogenic bacteria. Okay. So these are the three types of bacteria that can be seen in case of domain bacteria. And then the cyanobacteria is a very important one. Cyanobacteria mean they are known as photosynthetic blue-green algae. So what interesting fact about this cyanobacteria is, in the previous environment, okay, in the early geologic periods, in that anaerobic environment, oxygen level were increased with the help of this cyanobacteria only. This is the science. Okay, they are telling that only with the help of this cyanobacteria, the environment which was anaerobic in the earlier stages was later converted into an aerobic environment with the help of this cyanobacteria. So this is an important fact about this cyanobacteria. Okay. And the third type we are going to learn about the domain eukarya. So in domain eukarya you will have all the eukaryotes here. So eukaryotes means, you know, it is having a true nucleus, it is having the membrane bound organelles, everything, and the DNA is present along with the histone proteins. You know, this DNA strand will be, this histone proteins will be wrapped in the DNA strands. Okay, so this is in case of eukaryotes alone. So the DNA with the histone proteins is present, and then the ribosomes 80S type is also there, 70S type is also there. So this is what about the three domains. Okay, and next I'll give just a flow chart of all these classification system that were followed. So this three domain system, it has the archaea, bacteria as well as the eukarya, and there was a traditional five kingdom concept. You know who gave this five kingdom concept? Five kingdom concept was given by R.H. Whittaker. Okay, so R.H. Whittaker gave this five kingdom concept. So what is this is, Monera was there, Protista, fungi, plantae and animalia, and then the six kingdom concept were there, and in there bacteria, archaea, Protista, fungi, plantae and the animalia. So this was the six kingdom concept. And then, you know, a person called as Cavalier Smith, he gave this seven kingdom concept. So what is the seven kingdom concept is? First one is eubacteria, and then the archaea bacteria, protozoa, chromista, fungi, plantae and animalia. So these were the seven kingdom concept. So there was three domain system, there was five kingdom concept, there was six kingdom, and then the seven kingdom concept. Okay, so what is the seven kingdom concept? I have already told you, it was given by Cavalier Smith in 1987, and this, what he did is he just revised that six kingdom concept and gave this seven kingdom concept. So in this seven kingdom concept, you are having two subdivisions. You are having two prokaryotic kingdom under this seven kingdom, and a five, that is these two prokaryotic kingdoms include eubacteria as well as archaebacteria. Both are prokaryotes. Okay, so we are having two prokaryotic kingdoms. Another five kingdoms are all eukaryotic kingdoms. Okay, so that is protozoa, chromista, fungi and plantae. They are all coming under the eukaryotic kingdom. So this is what the seven kingdom concept, which was given by Cavalier Smith in 1987. Okay, so what he did, he just revised the six kingdom concept into a seven kingdom one, and there it has two prokaryotic kingdoms, that is eubacteria and archaebacteria. They both are prokaryotic kingdoms, and whereas they had a five eukaryotic kingdom where you are having the protozoa, chromista, fungi and plantae. So this is what the various systems which were followed. Okay, so I hope this class is very clear. We have just learnt about the diversity in living organism and what are the characteristics of living organism, and then we learnt about the taxonomy and systematics, need for classification and history of classification, and then we have also learnt about the three domains of life. Okay, so this is the first half of your first chapter. So I hope this is very clear. So if you have any doubts, you can feel free to ask me, right? So take the notes in your biology note, and doubts please note it down and ask me and clear it. So okay, so see you soon in the next class. Thank you, children.